Hey guys, what's up? This is Insanity. Got a gameplay of Black Ops Cold War on PC. This video is going to be a review on The Flash, and the discourse surrounding this movie was equally as depressing as the discourse surrounding Quantumania. Not because I was looking forward to seeing it succeed in the first place, but because the movie is a joke, and at some point the joke stops being funny and just starts being sad. There are already more than enough people kicking the movie down for its failures and gleefully rubbing it in the faces of Warner Brothers Discovery, since the movie is unremarkable for the most part, despite their claims of this being one of the best superhero movies ever. It's only just one of the most superhero movies of all time, certainly. My overall rating for it is a 6 out of 10. It would have been better if I can just hate the movie outright, but there are glimpses of a mildly entertaining, potentially emotionally resonating movie in The Flash. It's just that The Flash makes way too many baffling decisions that undermine a movie and turn it into a merely watchable, it's whatever kind of movie. Let's start with the things that I liked. The first and most obvious is Michael Keaton's Batman. At least on a superficial level, he was great. He got nice action moments, he contributed to the plot, and despite showing up with a hobo look, he wasn't some burnt out hobo. He's basically the kind of Luke Skywalker that certain fans would have wanted to see in The Last Jedi. Second, Supergirl was also pretty cool, even though everything about her is rushed, which I'll go into later. Third, Ezra Miller does a fine job as Barry Allen. As you guys know, I'm a Marvel guy, so I'm not too intimately familiar with the DC side of things, and I'm sure there's probably other people who could play a better Barry Allen or better Flash, but Ezra Miller was good enough. I think Ezra nailed some of the emotional scenes, and the contrast between the more mature Barry Allen versus his alternate younger counterpart was nicely pronounced. Even the reviews I've seen that start with bringing up Ezra Miller's antics and are negative on the movie in general have some kind of, or rather have kind of sort of acknowledged that Ezra Miller does a fine job. I have not seen Ezra Miller in anything, so Justice League was my first exposure to Ezra, and I thought Ezra was fine there, even though neither the Joss Whedon or Zack Snyder's versions of Ezra's Barry Allen were compelling. The Joss Whedon version was too awkward and annoying, and the Zack Snyder version was too serious in spite of being the only one on the team with any semblance of a personality, and even that falls to the wayside when Zack Snyder portrays the Justice League like work colleagues rather than a union of wholly different worlds coming together. Given that this movie is a Flash movie in spite of the marketing pretending that this is more of a Batman movie and that you're dealing with seeing two Barry Allens on screen and therefore double the Ezra Miller, the responsibility falls on Ezra Miller to carry this movie, and I thought Ezra was better than in Justice League. It does come with a certain caveat concerning Ezra's performance for alternate Barry, but that's going to come later. I did find Ezra stiff in the scenes where Barry is interacting with Iris, though that might probably fall under a nitpick as the romance subplot is just obligatory, and that's not the story that the movie is interested in telling. Lastly, the emotional core of Barry just wanting to reunite with his family in a figurative sense, since he lost his mom to a murderer and lost his dad to the justice system was a solid one. And if the movie didn't try to add all these juicy elements in an attempt to spice up the first Flash movie, I would have much preferred seeing a kind of Flash movie that was small scale and just focused on Flash's world, as opposed to a multiverse one. Those are the things that I liked about Flash. As for the things that I didn't like, oh boy. The scenes in a Chrono Bowl, as Barry calls it. I am not one to critique visual effects if I can just enjoy the story while acknowledging the visual effects are bad, but I really have a hard time understanding the conscious choice to make every timeline or event that shows up in a Chrono Bowl rendered in CGI, due to both having actual blood and flesh actors they could have used to portray all the different timeline outcomes, and having things like Barry's first meeting with Bruce and first encounter with Superman also rendered in CGI when they could have used stock footage to show those events was certainly quite a decision. And if they took the actual footage or stock footage and consciously splattered them in CGI, that honestly makes things even worse. That's just extra costs for CGI that are completely unnecessary. The director said that the Chrono Bowl having the CGI looking that way it did was a conscious choice, and many people might call that BS to deflect criticism, but I can certainly believe it to an extent. It's just only one of the many baffling decisions made by the film. Secondly, as much as I like Michael Keaton and Supergirl, objectively speaking, they were nothing more than glorified action figures. Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne is the best version of himself, as he explicitly states that he had cleaned up Gotham to the point that it's been one of the safest cities for over 30 years. There's no real story to tell with that kind of character, as Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne already had closure some time within those 30 years. That just leaves him as primarily someone to kick ass and spout old catchphrases and supporting Barry. But apart from one heart-to-heart interaction with Barry, Michael Keaton has no impact on Barry's story or his character development. Supergirl only appears near the end, and apart from helping main Barry get back his powers, she gets a very rushed character arc just to get her in position for a final battle. She also has no impact on Barry's story or development. She's just one extra heavyweight to fight with in the final battle. This leads to the ending, which, if one thinks about it very carefully, it's actually a terrible ending for all involved. Main Barry dooms his alternate universe to die when he feels certain that he can't change the outcome, and that means both Michael Keaton and Supergirl from his universe are effectively dead, with no confirmation of their survival. In addition, while the closing scenes of Barry saying goodbye to his mom in his alternate universe were touching, and Barry decides to let the past go, he immediately undermines the lesson he was supposed to learn by still altering the past slightly in order to get evidence to exonerate his dad. Then the movie proceeds to give Barry some kind of ending that's supposed to be happy but ends on a joke with the changed appearance of Bruce Wayne that he isn't familiar with. This ending is an inside joke that means nothing to anyone who is not a hardcore DC person. And if you're a Zack Snyder guy, oh boy, I can easily imagine being pissed off at the idea that the universe Barry is in has either completely replaced Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne, or Barry just ended up in an alternate universe with the decision that he made. So the ending is ironically not as happy as it appears. It comes across as main Barry still coping with his trauma in a selfish way than actually letting it go and moving forward. Not every problem has a solution is a line that gets repeated a few times in this movie, but it sure seems like Barry found a solution, just not the absolute best one. Lastly, the biggest issue this movie makes is that apparently Barry has not once even thought to look into the person who killed his mom. He obviously knows his dad didn't do it, so why isn't this a particular point of interest for him? Let's stop the chain of events that led to my mom dying on the day, and in one part those chain of events that led to his mom dying, namely that someone had to be there to figuratively pull the trigger on his mom, isn't factored into Barry's thought process at all. The guy who can travel through time seemingly with no real drawbacks and wanting to fix his past should be able to use his power to locate his mom's killer. It would be one thing if his time traveling ability had some kind of limitation that Barry has to use his time traveling capabilities more carefully, but there's nothing in the movie to suggest that he has any limitations. The director of Flash will later come out and say that Reverse Flash is in fact responsible for Barry's mom's death, just like in the comics, and this would have been a factor in a theoretical Flash sequel, which sure as hell ain't happening with how poorly the Flash is doing in theaters. So the question becomes, why isn't this been in the movie? The whole movie hinges on Barry making a selfish decision to time travel to the past where he can fix the events of the day that broke him, and this is what causes the movie to happen. I hardly call this a nitpick when it's such a glaring omission that it's difficult to ignore. I have one more issue of the movie which I feel is more of a nitpick than a real issue, but while Ezra Miller is good enough, alternate Barry is essentially the Joss Whedon Barry turned up to 11 as an even more insufferable character. It's hard to enjoy the dual act in contrast between the two Barrys, and one of them is so obnoxious, and not even having main Barry calling out alternate Barry for his antics and immaturity makes alternate Barry any more tolerable. It's only come to final battle that alternate Barry is much more tolerable, and he has one humorous scene involving him grabbing one of Michael Keaton's old bat suits and trying to slice off the ears that was funny without needing him to talk. Like I said before, it would have been better if I could just outright hate The Flash, but it's just merely a watchable movie that makes too many baffling decisions. Being boring is the greater sin of a movie that's bad, and that's not The Flash. It's just a movie that exists, finishing dead last in a sea of superhero movies where a couple of them have already done all the Flash's gimmicks first: time travel, multiverse, nostalgia bait, and did them better. So yeah, that is my review for The Flash, and that's the gameplay and commentary. Hope you enjoyed it, and Insanity is out.
Later! Oh boy.